The records are now open. So it's like funny because they kept having like the clearing of the throat, the clearing of the throat, the clearing of the throat. And it was like, just this, we'll jump into what you're saying, but I'm getting bombarded with things. Like they were showing like a person like writing in a book, like with like a feather pen,
Yeah.
writing in a journal, typing on a computer, right? And so there's like all these levels of communication and all these levels of free speech.
Yes.
And so it's like, and then they said something, they're saying something like silenced for so long. Some have been silenced for so long that it's like, bleh. Some have actually been silenced. And so those who have been silenced are having these moments of release, whether it's, I'm going to make art, or I'm going to write my book, I'm going to finally write my book. Like people are doing that right now. I'm going to write my
Or
book.
their tweet,
What's that?
or the tweet,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because it's the same thing, but different.
Yeah.
It's an expression of thought. One used to require an institution and a publisher, but now it's just, but then it's coming full circle and the publisher is saying no, like you can't, like they're Twitter censoring some things. So these like free mechanisms get, it's like too good and then it gets shut down again.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
they just said free speech, free spam.
spam.
Free speech.
Noise, it's noise,
Yeah. And
noise.
I'm seeing like someone like in your inbox, you're like, oh, this, it's like it's diluted. Like our words are so diluted and like muffled and muddled and muddy and messy and mixed up, and they're just showing like mud. They're showing like that person writing in their book as if like water got on it and you can't even read it anymore. Like what are they even saying? Like it's that. But go
Mm.
ahead, jump into whatever you want to kind of talk about and ask.
So I'll frame this thought. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and basically it was describing growth patterns of individuals, humans, obviously. And there's this like 0 to 7 age where you just play and you figure out your identity. And then 7 to late teens, you're with your peers and they challenge you. So you do something that's weird, and they're like, "That's weird." You do something good, and they're like, "That's good." And that's where you really go from like you center in an identity, and then you pop out, and then you're in your 20s plus, and you break free of that peer bubblingness. And I think there's a societal parallel to that. So there's like an individual thing, there's a societal thing. So the question is sort of what what are those stages like, and on a societal level, where are we at in terms of our ability to develop a global consciousness identity through peer feedback to grow into something greater? And where does free speech play a role in that? So I know you can get yes or no questions, but that's like the framing of my thoughts.
So let's pick this apart and we can go back and keep asking the questions. They keep showing me a walrus with really, really long, it's like a horn. What are the horns? Tusks. It's like this old, ancient, wise walrus. And they're showing it in view. And when you started talking about kids, it was right in front of me. And I was like, oh, wisdom. Okay, kids, wisdom, pure consciousness, wisdom, right? Right in front of me. And as you started talking about getting older and all those other things, the walrus went like this, up and like completely out of view. Like I couldn't see it anymore. But there was something about like, they're saying like kids genius. The kid's genius, the say it
Well,
again.
the thing about children, the example this guy gave was the girl has two names, a first name and a middle name, and his mother calls the first name, his father calls the middle name. But if you ask her who she is, she says, "I'm Pocahontas." And she's all like 100% like, "Are you Pocahontas? Are you this? Are you that?" She's like, "I'm Pocahontas." So the point is, in the childhood era below, for like 0 to 6, it's like there's no constraints. It's total play. And at that stage, the peers are not telling anyone that it's wrong. And it's really important not to do that, right? So that's an important constraint of free thought. I am what I want to be. No one can say I'm not. But that period has to end. It's very important that it ends before you can. It's the way you decide and find your vector, find your compass, and then you have something. So I'm wondering if there's a walrus growing out of that. I'm not sure how that relates there, but that was a cornerstone of what I wanted to talk about today.
Okay, so what you just said. Okay, so first the walrus was kind of like that wisdom, kind of like we lose sight of that. It like goes away. Like we're conditioned to lose sight of the wisdom, but they just said kids believe in themselves. So when you ask the kid your name, da, 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 and they say Pocahontas, they believe I am Pocahontas. That is their being. They embrace it. They are not aware of everybody else. And so what they're showing me is like, think of like little kids and like the family, right? Like imagine you have like, there's one grandchild, right? So they started showing me like my family and, you know, my first niece, Kira. And it's like, it's her world and we're living in it. That's how we are as kids. It's just our world. It's just right in front of us. So we believe in ourselves. This is our world. It's like our movie, like this, right? And then over time, we start to become aware of other people. When I say this, they feel that. When I say this, they do that. And then we start to teach them. And so they become,
That's fam-
they say they lose themselves and they start to embody and embrace the thoughts and they're saying energies and knowledge and wisdom, quote unquote, of everyone else, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is an important base. So there was a clinical psychologist that was talking about this, which is it's very important that kids have the free age where they explore. And it's dumb. He's like, it'd be insane for me to tell my granddaughter, you are not Pocahontas. Some parents do that, by the way. Some parents are like, you're Jamie, you are not Pocahontas. But to a 3-year-old, that's insane. She's like, I'm Pocahontas. 100% certain, knowing. So you have to give kids that space. But then at some point, you can't be 11 and being certain you're Pocahontas because your friends are gonna be like, what are you talking about? You're Julia. You're not Pocahontas. And at some point, the peer pressure, positive and in a positive way, helps bounce ideas around things. But I want to draw the parallel to society for a second because on a societal level, we need to give freedom to maybe not 0 to 6, but all people in stages of their life as a community to be Pocahontas. Throw ideas out there, unchallenged. Great. This is the Burning Man thing. What if you put a walrus on a scuba diver and then put it on a banana? Like, great, like just more ideas. But at some point, you got to build, right? Like the ideas have to end. You have to really put it together. So, where is society not allowing that free thought? And how do we encourage that productively without insult? Is the question.
They made it really clear. They were like, we're shutting down the imagination. And this seems extreme, right? Because of like the way that we've grown up in society. They were like, they're showing me like, imagine if everybody allowed themselves to be who they thought they would be. And they're showing this like unfolding of like imagination and creativity and creation and this and that, whatever. And like the things that we would build, like what would that girl think? What would that girl create in a world where she was born such and such a name, but she chose to be Pocahontas for as long as she wanted to be? And what does she do as her belief of I am Pocahontas? What would she do? Would she connect with the animals? Just be free to explore that? And so it's like I'm getting like run amok, right? So someone somewhere along the line decided that we need to reel it in. And so all of those, I'm getting like, it's like almost like the imagination, like Pandora's box, right? It's in a box. It's like our world could be so much more imaginative and creative, like beyond our wildest dreams. Like the things that we create in movies could be our world, but we're going into this box and we're like, no, you can't. Like,
Yeah.
and they're showing me Avatar, the movie Avatar. And they're like, no, we can't live in that. And then they're showing, yeah, but you could do Burning Man in the jungle and it looks like Avatar. Like they're showing me that right now. Like they're like, why? Like we are so conditioned to limit ourselves and they're saying shrink wrap and suffocate our imagination and all the possibilities. And they're even saying like the evolution of our species, like we are so intelligent and we are so creative, and we destroy. So when you said the thing about the girl being told she's not Pocahontas, they came in and they said that's terrible. It's terrible to tell a child that they are not who they feel they are in that moment. It's like, let them decide who they want to be, and that's very controversial.
Well,
Right.
this is the whole the thing about science. The example this professor gave was sometimes he'll have a hypothesis, and then he puts the hypothesis out there to his scientific community, his peers. And he said that you think that you want people to be like, yes, you're onto something. It's like, but actually, he's like, the best thing as a scientist is for someone to be, for all your peers to be like, that's a crazy idea. Don't, like, that's awful. Because either you're wrong and like, who cares? Like, you tested it, it's not valid, or you're right and no one saw it. He's like, but the problem is in schools today, some ideas are dangerous. Some ideas hurt feelings. And now ideas aren't getting out there because of feelings. So I don't know the right question, but how do we ensure that, I'll say science, which is a method of posing hypotheses, validating the null hypothesis, like it's definitely correct, and then having people validate it, right? So what is the right approach today with everyone's feelings, which are absolutely important, but willingness to let people's feelings get hurt, sticks and bones and break my bones, but words never hurt me. How do we teach this generation that words are okay?
Okay. There,
It's okay.
there,
Yeah.
there are two things you're answering. So before the words and the teaching
Yeah.
that, we're going to go back to the science when you were talking about science, because they were coming through very strongly about that. They were like, what is the difference between science and science fiction? And so science fiction is allowing for all possibilities and the openness to be able to expand and create and grow. And they're showing the opposite of science is stripping down the creativity and the possibilities to find that little bit of proof and truth. But it's like what they're saying is like, actually, let's bend reality a little bit, because science fiction is not so far away if we allow it to live and breathe and exist and be what it's meant to be. They're actually showing that like science actually strips things down to something that's digestible and very, very small.
It's very
Whereas
small.
science fiction is bending realities and coming up with ideas of more, better creation, creativity. And they're like spaceships, and like all these things. It's like, you guys fly planes, you guys have spaceships in the sky. Like, it's not so far away, it's not so far fetched, you're already doing it. But it's like I'm getting like, who chooses what is what is reality and what is not reality? It's like they're saying like, who made you in charge? Who made who in charge of possibilities when possibilities are endless?
So
Why
I
are we
think
stripping?
there's two ways to compress that. First is both have to exist, right? Because um, certain things are objective, generally speaking, right? You hit someone in the face with a baseball bat, that's going to hurt. Like, you don't really need to run too many scientific experiments to prove that one's true. You put a certain amount of force on a thing, it will break. But you can broaden your horizons way more than that, and that is freedom, because you can test things in scientific reality. And this is really, I want to draw this parallel to the internet, because people have their internet personas and they have their real personas. You can't really test your real persona so much. For example, you can't change your gender like that in the real world. But if you want your Instagram profile to be from a man to a trans woman, you could do that tomorrow really fast, right? That's the experimental realm. This is the real world. What's it saying now?
No, they're saying bending reality, but when you first started, they started saying like limited thinking, limited thinking. But then when you
Which
finish
is
with
limited? The real world's limited or the internet's limited?
the real world, no, something you were saying early on, they kept saying limited thinking, limited thinking. And then at the end of what you were saying, they said bending reality. When you were talking about someone pretending, or not pretending, somebody creating a persona and
Mhm.
presenting it, that's a bending of reality. that's playing with reality. And it's like, well, what is true? Because a specific collective consciousness is identifying that person as that. And so within this collective consciousness that's created, that person is that. And then here, seeing you and touching you, like that person might be someone else. And so, oh, they're actually saying this is kind of circling back to what you're saying.
Right.
Ooh, yeah, but they're saying like they're bringing you back to the girl who wanted to be Pocahontas, and how that part of us is like living out a little bit in a small, and not in a small way, in many ways, in a big way, in all the ways, on social media. So the
Yes.
part of us that wants to be Pocahontas is presenting ourselves as Pocahontas because that's who we want to be and that's how we want people to perceive us.
Exactly. Okay. So that's okay. There's the analogy. The analogy is children. Children should, doesn't always happen, but be told, no one should tell them you're not Pocahontas. So if a little, like a 10-year-old boy walks into his Boy Scout club telling everyone that he's a girl, they're probably going to be like, you're in the wrong place, pal. But if you did that online, it's pretty much going to be accepted. Or at least that's the spectrum. So where does that person live?
Hmm. So I'm seeing like the challenge of it, right? Because when you said all that, they were like, okay, well, if that young boy wants to be a girl, they said, okay, well then he can go to Girl Scouts, right? Like they were just showing like he can do that, right? And so, but that's
It's harder now.
in a perfect world. And what they're saying is like that journey of identifying like who you are is personal, and it's like nobody's business. And I'm getting like people want to project their ideas and ideals of who someone should be onto them, and it's like it's own, that it's that own. And they're showing me an example of, I don't know this boy's name, girl's name, I can't remember. If I don't know what the child decided, who the child decided to be in the end. Born a boy, has pink hair. I think was even on National Geographic as like the youngest like very openly identified trans child. And forgive my wording on this, but they were showing that that child wanted to be a girl so badly within a short amount of time, and so everyone was like, "Okay, you're a girl, you're a girl, you're a girl," and then changed her mind and went back to wanting to be a boy. And so it's like allow the kids to choose for themselves. It's like they're showing like they're saying guard them, be their guardian, and help them navigate who they want to be and integrate, right? And it's like you offer security and protection and a safe place for them to be who they want to be. And I'm getting that, like, if you see them going too far into something, you offer guidance. So it's like people are saying you shouldn't let a child decide what gender they want to be. They don't know anything.
They
Right.
shouldn't finalize.
What's that?
They shouldn't finalize.
Yeah.
That's the difference. It's okay to play. It's not okay to finalize when you're literally in the non-final. Like that was a three-stage thing. You literally play completely, you develop a general sense, toy with it, and then you pop out, which in their example was like 20s or something, right? So that's the difference. The difference is not to say that a kid can't choose their gender, but hormones at 5 might be too far. That's the definitive final thing, or a very biologically altering thing at an age where it's supposed to be fluid.
Yeah.
So allowing the fluidity in the natural gender without constraint, but not closing the box forever
Yeah.
or throwing that box to the other side of the river.
Totally, but they're actually saying that it's way more than that, and that our entire lifetime we change so much. So boxing ourselves in is very repressive. And they're giving me an example of someone I used to know who he had been married as a straight man. He had been straight most of his life, and then he's in this marriage, and he's like, "Oh my God, I am miserable because I am gay." He got divorced. He started dating men, has never been happier, right? So he spent so much of his life being this type of person. And it's like maybe he kind of was, but it was like figuring it out. But he locked himself into this identity and everybody bought into that identity. And it's like we don't let people change, we don't let people evolve. And it starts at a very young age. So it's kind of like we do change. Like I could decide that I want to be a man when I'm 60 years old, and that's my business. You know what I mean? And so they're
Online or offline, by the way.
what's that?
Online or offline or both.
Right. And they're saying it like it doesn't matter. I'm getting like the whole like social media thumb. They're confirming, yes, it's like persona. Like I'm just getting like TV. It's entertainment almost. It's entertainment. Like we all think we're on TV. We've all been like put in this place where we think we're on TV and we think people I'm getting like care what we have to say.
People care what we have to say.
We think that people care what we have to say. Everyone, I'm getting self-importance. Oh my God, self-importance. But I'm also getting like there's like intention behind it to like kind of, be together and connect and whatever. But anyway, so if you wanted to go back into like free speech, but that's what they were saying about like letting us be like who we are in whatever fantasy that might be, because we're changing and evolving and they're saying shape shifting, like
Mm.
if you live in who you are in New York, you might be someone totally different in Seattle. Like think
So
about how much you've changed.
okay, so great question. So great idea. So right now, as far as I can tell, I'm sitting in Seattle, Washington. Many years ago, that wasn't even a thought, and then some years after that, it was a thought, and then it manifested. Um, so if I decided right now that I'm a woman, theoretically, that could be true. Although I would argue biologically nothing has changed. Um, but let's jump to something different. Am I in New York right now?
They said you
Right.
can be.
Right. Well, am I? Like, says who? In the sci-fi world, sure, but in the real world, scientifically, I'm really not. If you define I as like the collection of molecules right here, and you define Seattle as the boundary of this location, it's pretty hard to dismiss that deny that I'm in Seattle. But if I decide that I'm in New York as a 60-year-old black trans woman, who's to say I'm not? On the one hand, I could say whatever I want and believe in sci-fi, but on the other hand, someone else can be like, Jason, are you sure that you're not a 33-year-old man sitting in Seattle? Because I literally see a 33 man in Seattle. That is the free speech part. Someone should be able to say that without insulting me, and I should be able to be like, let me make a really good point. Like I am literally in Seattle, but I feel like I'm a 67-year-old black woman in New York. That dialogue has to be free. Like I feel like the problem is if someone can't say, "Are you nuts, Jason? You're not in New York right now," without me losing my shit and shutting that person out of my life. So I said a few things there, so I want to see how they're
Yeah.
responding. But
So,
that's the free speech I'm talking about.
totally. So what they were saying first was like with the you can be in New York is like, I mean, I don't know if this is just you personally, but they were like, technically you can astral project and be in New York. You can close your eyes and astral project and you can put yourself in Times Square. You can smell all the smells. You can smell those peanuts. You can
Okay.
smell like, oh, like some of the like gross stuff off the sidewalk. Is it cold? Is it like you could put yourself there. Then what they were saying is by saying I am, you start creating an identity. So when you said, I am a black trans woman, and if you say it every day over and over and over and over and over again, even if someone's looking at you like, huh, you're crazy, huh, you're crazy. And then over time, you might do little things to start looking like that. But also, some people are going to try, once you say, I am this, you're standing in your truth, in your identity. And so someone's going to try and look harder and like, are you? And all of a sudden I'm going to perceive where you are and I'll be like, well, there's a little bit of shadow in here and like your skin is looking a little bit darker and are any of those mannerisms looking feminine? What are you wearing? Like what are you, and they're basically saying like you could be, you throw on more feminine clothing, you put on some heels, you dress yourself up, you start growing your hair out, maybe you start changing things about your body, and then yes, you can be a black trans woman. So it's like I'm just saying like there's something about when a person identifies with something, it causes a shift in the consciousness when people look at that person. And they're like,
Sure.
wait, you believe that? And so some people are like, no, you're not. And they just write it off and look away. But some people be like, you are? And it's almost like depending on how authentic that is to who you feel, you actually start shape shifting and people start seeing aspects of that in who you are. And then over time, you can become that. I'm getting that it's like slow, but it happens all the time. And they're saying it happens with trans people. they identify with something and they struggle their whole lives because they feel like they're not in this body, and then they get to a certain point and very slowly over time they can start to afford surgeries to make that identity a reality over time, and over time people will say, oh my god, you are.
Mm.
So
So
it's
so
interesting.
here's the fun one, or fun, interesting idea is for others that you come across. So in the 5-year-old spectrum, someone can say, I'm Pocahontas, or they could say, I'm Batman, whatever it is. Um, and people can, like, the 5-year-old peers could be like, you are Batman. That's so cool. Or they could be like, you're not Batman. I'm literally certain of it. Look, you're Billy. You're not Batman. And then as you get older, it's getting a little more insane to be Batman, but you could say you are. But here's the point, it's important to allow your peers to challenge you freely, I think, with suggestions, positive, negative, because it can't just be positive. It has to be balanced because the way we grow is by going across our peers and it's like, hey, like that's a little off. Like we're not sure how we feel about that. The question is, how do we respect one's freedom to feel like they can evolve to who they are while also respecting anyone's freedom to suggest anything to the contrary? Um, and is there any restrictions there
Yeah.
with the challenging?
So they're saying that when you do that, you are challenging someone's will. You're challenging someone's integrity. You're challenging someone's truth. If they believe that truth so deeply, if they are so in alignment with that truth, you're not going to change their mind.
Or even you'll further reinforce it
But they're also
in a
saying,
good way.
yeah, but they're, oh, yeah, totally. But they're also saying that you might challenge someone and their will is not that strong. And the thing that they said, they are not fully in their integrity. They are not fully in their truth. And so by you saying that, you break something down in them and they can shift and change. And they keep saying shape shifting, shape shifting. We shape shift, we evolve, we do. This is something that just happens, and I'm getting collective consciousness. And they're showing like these like waves and webs and wires and like where we all are on the planet and towns, and like they're showing me like the map of the United States. And it's like, the people in New York, there's this very specific, like there's a lot of like collective consciousness in New York, and then there's a collective consciousness in Alabama, and there's a collective consciousness in Illinois. They're showing all of that.
Mm,
And so it's like, the thing is like, you kind of shape shift to your environment. Like we're constantly finding balance in our environment, and sometimes our environment is so not in alignment with us that it creates disease, it creates mental illness. So some of these people who are falling apart and cracking and breaking down and getting cracked down, whatever, they're in a place that is just not in alignment with who they truly are. And they have to find another place to be, or it's going to make them crack. I'm getting mental health, mental illness.
yeah,
People don't know that that intensity, when it makes you feel that way, it's telling you to move. It's
get
telling
out of that
you to move.
collective consciousness.
Yeah.
Um, there was something that flashed into my mind, which was along the lines of fragility. And when you work out, you get sore and you build. And how much being around the wrong things can illuminate why it's wrong. And maybe some children grow up in some awful, awful suffering so that they grow up to be like, that'll never happen to my kids. And so I'll use one illustrative example to the free speech thing. And there's extremes here. This is definitely not the norm. But I read about a San Francisco Bay Area, really wealthy private school that took this white privilege thing really far and basically asked like the third graders to stack rank themselves in terms of their privilege. Like I'm the most white, I'm the worst, and then so basically who is the least bad in terms of their privilege. And so the question is, how would a white child, green child, red child, black child be able to challenge the teachers and say, I don't feel comfortable with this, or the parents for that matter? Not saying it's right, not saying it's wrong, but literally just the ability to say, this feels segregating, this feels wrong. How do we give those kids the voice, and how do we give the community, like, this is a good experiment. What if we did stack rank each other? But then we also have to say, is that right or wrong? Shutting out ideas to say, well, you're going to hurt someone's feelings because they're black and they feel like they're hurt, that doesn't feel right. But never testing this idea feels wrong too. So how do we give the strength to those kids to challenge, even though they're going to be up against the world of
Yep.
resistance?
Totally. They gave it to me. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And they're saying this is the future of the educational system. You're sitting in class, they're actually showing kind of like round tables. It's the intention of the debate, and the teacher is a mediator. The teacher is there to let them hash it out and let them speak their voices, but there's an intention. You speak at the beginning, there's a framework, a formula of what the topics are. They're saying like it's like an intentional debate where everyone can speak and voice their opinions, and then at the end of it there is an intention for peace. So there's an intention of accepting the fact that we have different opinions, but the fact that everyone gets a chance to speak. And I'm getting that people might raise their voices and yell, people might cry, but everyone gets their turn. And I'm getting like, you pass the stick, you pass the mic. So people don't interrupt each other. We're not doing this, we're not doing that. Everyone waits their turn to speak, and they get out what they need to get out. And there's the power of circle, right? Everyone throws up everything in the circle, and you leave it in the circle, and then you go back to your life in peace. But it has to be mediated, and the beginning of the conversation and the end of the conversation has to be based on peace.
Nice. That is perfect, because it allows for, well, broadly speaking, this is the technique of life. It's like you have to be able to challenge, you have to be able to discuss, but you also have to do it in a productive way. Yelling and screaming doesn't work. And by the way, most parents that I've looked around don't really have this skill. Most adults don't have this skill. So we can empower kids to develop this skill by allowing them to hash out some of the most controversial things out there. Instead of 6-year-olds, let's use 15-year-olds, like pretty much adults now. And it's the most controversial things that you can imagine, in our day and age. Everything from how much is the increase of anti-Asian sentiment? What is the percentage of police officers that abuse Black people? What is the distribution? Can we get data on these things without a Black person saying, you can't say that because I'm hurt? And without a gay person saying, you can't say that because that's my identity. Because if you're in the circle, these are suggestions. These are, I have this on my mind. I got to get it out there. But then, and this is where I want to like get the records understanding, like, how do you close that thing? Because it's hot. It's like, ooh, like most people can't like either dump the conversation. So how do we forge the technique of closure as productively as possible amongst children, with free voice being the beginning, but you can't be free forever. You have to end something. And so I don't know, something along those lines.
So this just got really serious. Um, they're saying like communication needs to be a required class in school. And I'm going to tell you why, what's happening to kids. They don't speak. They don't know how to communicate. They're communicating in phones with emojis. The English language is dead to them. There's actually like a serious issue with communication and what it's doing to them. They're like this. They don't speak to each other, or it's like minimal and it's very superficial, whatever, like this. And then it's causing like pretty like severe depression. And what's happening is they're going like this, like all of them is shutting down. They can't speak, they can't communicate, they don't know how to communicate. And I'm getting that their crown chakras are blasting open and connecting with the divine. So they're highly intuitive by not being able to speak and not knowing how to speak and use their voice and their throat chakra and speak from their heart. It's really suffocating and it's really debilitating to these generations. And so we literally have to have communication classrooms where it is required that we teach students how to communicate. And I'm getting like on many levels, like we literally have like fucked up. I'm getting like 2 generations allowed to speak. They can't speak. And they're saying like we've totally like we've taken like a massive dump on the on the language, on language, period. And so, but this is extremely debilitating because from I'm getting from a mind, body, soul experience, you have to be expressing your voice. You have to speak. You have to speak. And they literally are not equipped with the words. They don't know the words to talk. They don't know the words to speak. It's all very superficial. Like we've really destroyed, they're saying 2 generations abilities to communicate and connect on a level of using their voice and speaking. And they're terrified, they're fearful because they're seeing all these adults fighting and yelling at each other. And they're just like, they don't even want to speak. It's like, even if they wanted to speak, even if they knew what to say, they don't want to because they see this and they're just like, so they're
Yeah,
highly intuitive in one way, but it's really unhealthy in another way.
this is the trajectory that I've been concerned about with cancel culture, is that its intentions feel good, protect people because they're vulnerable. Speech can be painful. Speech can be hate. On the surface, seems like a great idea, but in truth, it's actually not, because it ends up further muffling. Just I'll take this in a different direction in a moment, but that's where we have to find the balance, and that's why that circle concept is so key, because there's places to talk free, work shit out, but then take the other pieces, because they were talking in this podcast yesterday, these psychologists, biologists, on how humans can only take so much novelty. It's very hard, maybe like a little bit. Most people have 2 transformations in their life, and they're usually small. So it's unrealistic to expect this dialogue from the circle to be real life. It's got to be a little contained area, whether it's a Friday night ritual, building rituals is a theme. Um, those tools have to develop, but it can't be expected to solve all the problems at once. But there has to be some space to speak freely, and then other spaces where it's safe. But you can't only be in one or the other. And I see this tendency where, especially the people who have grown up in the internet, with the echo chambers, this is what you mean with the muffling, they don't know how to speak. And not knowing how to speak is going to prevent them from solving the problems they need to solve. Where's the next form of human communication going? So you started with this with writing. You used to have rocks and scripts and paintings, and then you had typewriters, and now you have the internet. It's going fast into this new direction. And I don't know if this is exactly where it's going, but we will have brain chips. Those brain chips will allow us to fluidly communicate in nanoseconds to each other, expressing sentiments and feelings. We might be able to lock things out. Is that tool solving the problems, or is it making it worse?
So they just cut into everything, and you're like, what is the next level of communication? Do you want to know what they said?
Rocks.
Telepathy. Telepathy.
Telepathy. Yeah, so that's what I'm referring to. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's computer assisted telepathy, which this is what Terence McKenna once said, and it's been on my mind for 15 years. Telepathy is not reading someone's mind, is deeply understanding what they mean. Words are kind of telepathy. You know what I mean in my head. We have similar dictionaries, but it takes me blah, blah, like mouth noises and then you kind of listening. The instant connection with the circles, metaphorically, I think will allow people to bounce ideas off. It's like, woof, that was crazy. What works, what doesn't? But the scale and speed is going to be tremendous. Um, is that the solution, or is that the problem? Is my question.
They said that's the evolution.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's close on this one. That's going to be the most controversial thing ever. If you think that it's controversial, it's like everyone's on the subways on their phones. How about, what's the point of talking? Because we could just download matrix style information. How do we move people into that while maintaining humanity's essence.
They just said exactly. It's creepy. It's
It's
creepy. It's a little creepy. The fact that we won't have to speak to each other, we can just look at each other. And like I'm being shown like sitting on a subway and making eye contact with somebody and they're making eye contact and you know that you both just said good morning.
this is what okay, so I had this vision the other day about, is that the cure to racism? Just like, because you don't have to talk to someone, they don't speak your language. You just like look at someone and you're like, my brother, I feel you, I know you. So as hard as it's going to be in this world, and we can't only be in this world, right? That's key. We be in this world to understand each other,
Oof.
and then you pop out, and then you can smack hands and then wrestle, basically.
Okay, you ready though? No. So the thing about telepathy and empathy is that here's the thing, right? This is actually what those generations who can't speak are noticing. They're noticing that your words are bullshit. They're reading your energy. They can see that you're full of shit, that you're inauthentic. So that's the thing.
Sorry, who sees that?
So with telepathy and empathy,
Yes, they can.
you don't need to speak. You don't need to speak, which is hysterical because sometimes, not sometimes, all the time, the words are bullshit. The words are smoke and mirrors. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you and I know what is really going on. But that's the future of communication is like, you don't have to speak because if you speak and I can just see your inauthenticity, I just saw like, whatever you just said, someone looking at you and be like, nope.
White lies go away.
So it's like, you can't lie through telepathy. You can't like your energy doesn't lie. Your aura doesn't lie. I can see your soul. Sorry, that sounds really intense, but it's like I can see the authenticity of you and I can see when something's not in alignment. So it's like I see you in a certain way. I'm reading the shit out of you and you say something so different from what I'm seeing. I then know you are not in alignment and what just came out of your mouth is bullshit.
Wait, ready for it?
Yeah.
If that's the case, and information is near instant because you can download packets of information so fast, who's to say you can't absorb someone in its entirety? Like, for example, Charles Darwin's dead. Galileo's dead. Could I download them into me?
You
And
can
now
you can channel them. So you can, and this is funny because
right
actually
now I have to read a book, but like, could I literally just be like, got
you,
the ideas of Galileo?
so I'm getting like it depends on your like personal abilities and capabilities of channeling, but excuse me, I'm getting you can channel their essence, you can channel their energy to kind of be around you and help inspire they're saying new ideas,
No idea.
right?
Yeah.
But they've already existed. That's already happened. So you're not going to recreate what they did, but you can have the inspiration of their energy around you, their books, you can have films, you can literally channel their energy. I'm getting like the blueprint of them back into existence around you. And then you will create new ideas based on the evolution of what that person created.
Have you heard of the famous quote from Sir Isaac Newton? If I have seen further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants.
Ooh.
It's like really powerful, but he was him admitting that, like, I'm just one guy, but there was a whole civilization of scientific thought that led to me. So the only reason I was able to see this stuff is because I'm standing on these giants, and that's exactly what you just articulated.
Yeah.
Is you're just basically downloading someone's that they got up to here, and now we're like sick. Okay, now I can see where things are. So maybe that's where, like, on the individual level, how does a black person and a white person who really don't like each other get to know each other? It's like, go to your circle. All right, I got where you're at, you got where I'm at. I see what you mean. Now we can talk, or it's already done. And like, there's tools that will just allow for this facilitation. We need brave soldiers to go into this space. It's going to be scary.
Yeah.
We need pioneers to be willing to put the chips in their head.
Yeah. I mean, what they're saying is like strip the skin off because it's not, I mean, we're so stupid that we've made it about this skin and they're showing like ripping skin off someone's body and you see the muscles and the guts and everything else inside. They're like, strip the skin off. if it doesn't matter whether you're black or if you're white, if you don't resonate with each other who you are, you're not going to get along. You can't force connections. You can't force peace between people. And that's why they're saying some people of different races get along and some people of different races don't. And it actually has nothing to do with skin color. It has to do with your energy and your vibrational match versus not. You don't have to get along with everybody, and not everybody has to get along with you. You keep it moving. So they're showing like the magnets, right? So some people, it's like, oh, you magnet kind of next to each other, you magnet to each other. And some people, like, you really just repel.
Hmm.
Some you repel like really, really strong. So they just keep showing, like, pull the skin off. Like, you can close your eyes and feel someone energy and be like, I fuck with you. I don't fuck with you. Oh, go away. Oh my God, come here. Like, that's the thing. It's like they're saying it's a problem of modern society to categorize us by skin. They're saying it's false and it's fake and it's based on nothing. They're actually saying it's based on nothing.
Hmm.
I'm getting stories passed down from generation after generation. It's like I'm seeing, like, oh, someone was out in the woods. Someone with dark skin was out in the woods late at night and saw a naked person running with light skin. And they were like, whoa, light skinned person, different. What is that? Like, it was just like, so they're saying so basic. And so they're saying basic instinct to differentiate, but it's coming from like primates even.
Oh shit.
Go ahead.
Teachers, mediators can be both human and AI.
Ooh.
Imagine me and you going into digital space, but it's hot. So an AI system who learns. So we basically do this. We have circles of real people, real teachers, real mediators. AI learns from how mediation works, so that when we enter this digital space, it's not just me and this other person going at it. It can be very intense, but an AI mediator is able to modulate all that thing. Is that coming in?
They keep saying troublemaker, troublemaker, troublemaker. What they're saying is, like, incorporating AI, incorporating technology is not going to mimic the capabilities of human connection. I'm just getting, like, we're so desperately seeking mimicking the human abilities. And I'm getting, it's like before we are even acknowledging how powerful we are, I'm getting like, okay, so I'm getting like AI can send signals, so that like kind of mimics our telepathy, right? It's like Wi-Fi, it can kind of send stuff and like the cloud and whatever, whatever. But they're like the human connection. Like, AI is not going to look into my eyes and know who I am as a soul.
right.
You and I are going to face each other, and you're going to look at me and you're going to see into my soul. That's the human connection. That's the bond. That's the bonded connection. So they're saying it's a troublemaker. Don't have something fault like that doesn't belong in the purpose of connecting humanity. That's not human.
Okay, we'll work on that.